as we continue to give you our analysis of the January 6th committee report based on the executive summary. For those who missed our previous broadcast about the committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol, we bring you the 17 findings that are listed in the executive summary of the report, and we will continue where we left off last time. We are now on findings number 14. Finding number 14 says, intelligence gathered in advance of the January 6th did not support a conclusion that Antifa or the left-wing groups would likely engage in a violent counter-demonstration or attack Trump supporters on January 6th. Indeed, intelligence from January 5th indicated that some left-wing groups were instructing their members to stay home and not attend the January 6th gathering. Ultimately, none of these groups was involved to any material extent with the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. Unfortunately, many of the legislatures, Congress members who were the MAGA, supporters, were saying that who were responsible for the violent attack were Antifa, the Antifa for anti-fascist. Okay? The truth is, from the findings of the committee, none of the Antifa, members or the left-wing groups were even there at that demonstration, at that riot or the attack on the Capitol. It was just part of their talking points to water down the gravity of what has been done, and they keep blaming it on the Antifa. So that's what they were trying to spread around even after that violent attack on our Capitol, and basically a violent attack against our country and our democracy. So basically what the report is trying to prove is based on their interviews, investigations, all data they could gather. There were no Antifa at the Capitol riot participating. Unfortunately, many of the Republican Congress representatives were spreading, the word that and making assertions that it was Antifa who was responsible for the attack, when in fact none of the Antifa members or any left-wing groups were even there. It was just their way of watering down the gravity of the situation and pointing at other people or another group to blame, which is very common whenever something bad happens where Republicans are involved. So finding number 14, no Antifa. Finding number 15, neither the intelligence community nor law enforcement obtained in advance of the January 6th on the full extent of planning by President Trump, John Eastman, Rudolph Giuliani, and their associates to overturn certified election results. Such agencies apparently did not and potentially could not participate the provocation President Trump would offer the crowd in his ellipse speech. That President Trump would spontaneously instruct the crowd to march to the Capitol, that President Trump would exacerbate the violent riot by sending his 2:24 p.m. tweet condemning Vice President Pence, or the full scale of the violence began. No intelligence community advanced analysis predicted exactly how President Trump would behave. No such analysis recognized the full scale and extent of the threat to the Capitol on January 6th. So here's what it's saying. Okay. The very significant aspect of why the intelligence community could not predict what was going to happen that day, even though there were chatters, there were information about, you know, some of what the bad players like the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers would do was they did not predict, the intelligence community did not predict that Donald Trump would make a speech in the ellipse to rile up the crowd and says, you march into the Capitol and you fight like hell, but if you don't fight like hell, you will have no more country. So that part he didn't, the intelligence community did not anticipate, nor did they anticipate that at 2:24 p.m. he would exacerbate, meaning he'll just aggravate the situation by sending a tweet saying that Vice President Pence has no courage to do what he was supposed to do, and that even angered the crowd even more, to the point that they were looking for Mike Pence to hang him. So that was finding number 15. Finding number 16. Hundreds of Capitol and DC Metropolitan Police officers performed their duties bravely on January 6th, and America owes those individuals immense gratitude for their courage in the defense of Congress and our Constitution. Without their bravery, January 6th would have been far worse. Although certain members of the Capitol Police leadership regarded their approach to January 6th as all hands on deck, the Capitol Police leadership did not have sufficient assets in place to address violent, lawless crowd. Capitol Police leadership did not anticipate the scale of the violence that would ensue after President Trump instructed tens of thousands of his supporters in the ellipse crowd to march to the Capitol, and tweeted at 2:24 p.m. Although Chief Stephen Sund raised the idea of National Guard assistance prior to January 6th, the Metropolitan Police took an even more proactive approach to the January 6th and deployed roughly 800 officers, including responding to the emergency calls for help to the Capitol. Rioters still surged forward, and immediately in the immediate aftermath of Donald Trump's 2:24 p.m. tweet, the Department of Justice raided a group of federal agents at Quantico, Virginia, and in the District of Columbia, anticipating the January 6th could become violent, and then deployed those agents once it became clear that the police at the Capitol were overwhelmed. Agents from the Department of Homeland Security were deployed to assist. So here's what was happening there according to the findings of the January 6th committee. The Capitol Police did not have the necessary resources to counter such a big violent crowd. Okay? There were 800 personnel total that were deployed, and that includes, the augmented force after the Capitol was already under siege. But they do not have the equipment, to counter the violent demonstrators. They didn't have enough of those what we call, you know, all the riot gears, anti-riot gears that a regular police department has, and at that big volume. And then it also reveals that when the Capitol attack was already in progress, the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security actually deployed their force. Their agents were on standby before the attack, and they did so, deploy them when the Capitol was breached, and as well as when it was under attack. Finding number 17, and this will be last of the 17 findings. President Trump had authority and responsibility to direct the deployment of the National Guard in the District of Columbia, but he never gave any order to deploy the National Guard on January 6th or any other day, nor did he instruct any federal law enforcement agency to assist. Because the authority to deploy the National Guard had been delegated to the Department of Defense, the Secretary of Defense could and ultimately did deploy the Guard. Although evidence identifies a likely miscommunication between members of the civilian leadership in the Department of Defense impacting the timing of deployment, the committee has found no evidence that the Department of Defense intentionally delayed deployment of the National Guard. The Select Committee recognizes that some at the department had genuine concerns concerning and counseling caution that President Trump might give an illegal order to use the military in support of his efforts to overturn the election. Genuine concern that Donald Trump might use the military in support of his efforts to overturn the election. Remember the talks about, in some interviews and all the talking of Trump supporters and his allies that the president should deploy the army or the National Guard to confiscate ballots that were supposedly fraudulent, you know, precincts that says that where he lost and they were going to confiscate the ballots. That was cause for a genuine concern in the military. Okay. And also, the foremost, most important thing in the finding number 17 is that the president did not exercise his duty to defend our country, defend Congress from these rioters. He did not order the National Guards to be deployed while he was just in his lunchroom at the White House residence watching the horror unfold. That is contrary to his oath of office to defend the country and to defend the Constitution of the United States. And the deployment of the National Guards, because of the many frantic calls from senators and congressmen, Senator Chuck Schumer and the Speaker Nancy Pelosi, asking the Secretary of Defense to deploy the National Guard. And the Secretary of Defense did indeed deploy the National Guard to protect the Capitol. But so many, after 3 hours, more than 3 hours of tense violent attack on the Capitol had already taken place. So, folks, a word from me is that, the country, our constitution, had to be defended at all cost, okay, from despots and fascist rulers who wants to topple our democracy. And in this case, uh, in January 6th, democracy won. And more so, it was evident that in the 2022 election, people remember that what happened on January 6th. And many came out to vote for a person to be the next president who loves our democracy and who is willing to defend it at all costs, and as well as the many lawmakers who got re-elected to Congress, both in the House of Representatives and the United States Senate.